and his brother say the man accusing them of assault lied during the trial. That allegation leveled today during closing arguments in the trial of Constable Michael Terrio and his brother. They are charged with assaulting Devontae Miller and obstructing justice. Lawyers for the men say Miller's version of events on the night in question is a lie. Loretta Redekop has more.
Defense lawyer Michael Lacey said this is a straightforward case, and the judge has to decide whose version of events he believes. He raised questions about Devontae Miller's credibility, saying he lied in court about what he was doing that night. The lawyer for Michael Terrio told the court Mr. Miller was not truthful in his account, and the Crown says it doesn't matter. One of Miller's friends testified earlier in the trial they were car hopping or stealing from vehicles, and Miller got chased after the two accused caught him in their driveway. That's what the two accused also say happened. Miller testified they were walking to visit some girls that night, that the two brothers chased him. Michael Terrio beating him with a metal pipe, both accused punching or kicking him. He was blinded. His left eyeball burst. His nose and jaw were broken. Lacey said this isn't about Miller's injury. Without a doubt, it's a horrible thing that happened, but sympathy doesn't dictate a case. The community is not entitled to a particular verdict. Crown lawyer Linda Shin said this isn't about sympathy. In their view, the evidence shows Michael Terrio wielded the pipe and used it to hit Miller. She pointed to an evidence photo, a crack in the door frame where Miller banged repeatedly, calling for help. She said that couldn't have been caused by a fist, but a pipe. In any case, Crown Peter Scrutton argued the force was unreasonable. Michael Terrio reported no injuries. Christian, a scratch and pain on his right side. Scrutton told the judge, if you accept Michael Terrio's account of this, he's still guilty of assault.
I'm here for Devontae. That's the only reason to be here, is here for Devontae.
Some of Miller's supporters in the courtroom are from black justice groups and question how the injury couldn't have come from the pipe.
And quite frankly, I don't know of any heavy welterweight champion of the world who's ever punched their opponent and have it remove the socket of their eye.
The judge said he'll need some time to go through all the evidence before he hands down his decision. That's expected on April 9th. Loretta Redekop, CBC News, Oshawa.
Health officials have now officially confirmed the second coronavirus case in Toronto. While it was presumed the woman had the virus, Ontario officials were waiting for confirmation from the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg. The woman is the wife of the man who was the first confirmed case of coronavirus in Canada. The two recently returned from Wuhan, China, the epicenter of the outbreak. Ontario is now investigating 23 possible cases of infection. That's up from 11 yesterday. Canada is adding itself to the growing list of countries repatriating their citizens from China, specifically from the region at the center of the outbreak. Karina Roman has the details.
Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister says the government has secured a charter plane to go to China to bring home Canadians who want to leave.
Now that's step one. After that, obviously in parallel to that, we need to work with the Chinese authorities with respect to the authorizations you need to bring the plane, obviously, in China.
160 Canadians have requested consular help, but as the minister indicated, any evacuation will not be immediate, as Canada needs to get diplomatic authorizations from China and figure out a list of logistical challenges. Those challenges include there's reduced consular staff on the ground, and the area in China is on lockdown, so mobility is an issue. Also, a key question is what if people are sick? Do they get on the plane? And will those who come back be put in isolation? And if so, where?
Part of the process now is figuring out exactly what our protocols will be when we return Canadians that wish to come home. And we're working very closely with our U.S. counterparts who obviously have some experience in this and have set up some best practices. And we'll be following their lead very closely. And we'll have more to say as those processes unfold.
Some Canadians in China have complained that the government has been slow to act. Champagne disagrees.
Canada is at the forefront of the response. We are talking with the allies. The only plane which has landed is a U.S. plane which was scheduled to be there. The other one is Japan this morning. I've talked to my counterparts. We're in touch with everyone. And I can assure you that the government of Canada is there to respond to this consular emergency that Canadians want there, and we will continue to do so. We're using best practices. Like I said, you need to tailor the response with the need of the people.
Meanwhile, the government has changed its travel advisory, now telling Canadians to avoid all non-essential travel to China. And Air Canada has suspended all its flights to Beijing and Shanghai starting tomorrow until the end of February. Karina Roman, CBC News, Ottawa.
Now, the news that Ottawa will be sending a flight to China to get Canadians out will likely come as a relief for a Toronto man whose 15-month-old child is stuck in Wuhan.
I'm certainly scared, worried, frustrated with the lack of response that I hear, and I feel helpless. I'm starting to get news where the United States, Japan, Germany, the Netherlands, they're all announcing plans to evacuate their citizens. So it becomes even more frustrating when we're getting nothing from our government about what the plans are.
That was Richard Fabish expressing his frustration last night. His daughter Chloe and his wife traveled to Wuhan in December. The family's in the process of moving from Toronto to BC. In order to make that transition a little easier, his wife left Chloe in Wuhan with family members. Then the outbreak happened and the city was locked down and flights canceled. Since then, Fabish and his wife have been struggling to figure out how to get their little girl home. The new coronavirus outbreak has claimed 132 lives and infected more than 6,000 people in China. There are nearly 70 confirmed cases in at least 16 other countries, with Finland reporting the first case in the Nordic region.
The vast majority of cases outside China have a travel history to China or contact with someone with a travel history to China. There are signs of a few cases of human-to-human transmission outside China in 3 countries, which we are monitoring very closely.
Officials from the World Health Organization, officials say they are concerned about those few cases, but are commending what they call China's extraordinary measures to contain the outbreak. The country is building 2 hospitals dedicated to dealing with the disease. The epicenter of the outbreak, Wuhan, and nearby cities have been quarantined. Meanwhile, British Airways has stopped all flights into the country. Many other carriers have either suspended or reduced service to China. Toronto's Mayor John Tory is taking on the misinformation surrounding the outbreak and what he says are incidents in the GTA of Chinese Canadians being stigmatized as a result. Ali Shiasan joins us live now from Chinatown. Ali, you were speaking to people in the Chinese community today. What are they telling you?
Well, Dwight, some people are saying they're having a bit of deja vu back to 2003 when we had the SARS outbreak. And that was a time when people were nervous to come to places like Chinatown, which for as long as we've been out here tonight seems as busy as usual. Dwight, no one wants to see a repeat of SARS here, both in terms of how this virus could spread, but also in the racism that could spread along with it.
Every time that, something like this comes out of China, we can expect to be, scrutinized or looked at or double take, oh, is your kid coughing?
To some, it's like SARS all over again.
People were doing things like avoiding Chinese people on the subway. There was a lot of fear, some of it rational, some of it not so rational. Some people were just jerks and they're just using any excuse to be a jerk.
I remember Chinatown being deserted. I remember stories of people, not sitting beside Asian people on the bus, on GTC, on public transit, and just people crossing the street and avoiding people.
And back then, we didn't even have social media, where people can be especially vicious.
Racism already exists in our society. The virus just gives this an opportunity for people who already share that view or harbor that view to publicly share that view with us through social media.
Today, the Chinese Canadian National Council was backed by City Council and the medical community.
I think it's important for all of us to recognize that in times of fear and uncertainty, people are going to look for blame. It is a natural human reaction. But at the same time, we want to not necessarily fall victim to that.
The problem here is a virus. It's not human beings. It's not countries. It's not aircrafts. It's a virus.
If you're anxious about your children or about yourself, should be to consult healthcare professionals, consult reputable sources of information.
You know, there was always going to be racial stereotypes, and we just have to learn to, be a little more informed and live with them.
In the meantime, it's business as usual in busy places like Pacific Mall in Markham.
We have more people wearing masks and such, but, we're still going about our business, and as everyone should.
Same goes for Chinatown.
We don't really talk about this very much. Nobody even mentioned that stuff. Like hot special noodles. I only saw two girls, young girls, wear the mask when they walk in. That's the only thing I saw. They be different.
Dwight, today the mayor and health officials reiterated the importance that people get their information from reputable sources. That means locally here from Toronto Public Health and globally by the WHO before coming to any conclusions, making assumptions, or resorting to any drastic measures here. Dwight.
An important message. Thank you, Ali. Of course, you can find the very latest on the coronavirus at cbcnews.ca. And still ahead, we head to Humber River Hospital to take you inside an isolation room designed specifically to manage pandemics. That's coming up. Plus,
building a giant new park over top a rail corridor like this isn't easy on a good day. And now a proposal has led to a battle between the city and a developer. I'm City Hall reporter Lauren Pelly, and I'll tell you how the city plans to win that fight coming up.
we have been spoiled this winter, Colette. Extreme cold weather alert is appropriate at this time of year.
Yeah, that's right, because we're really seeing, Dwight, this change in our weather patterns. So there are criteria that need to be met. I don't think we're quite going to get there, but sometimes the city will issue these just to let everyone know, hey, heads up, there's a change in what we have been experiencing, and also to make sure that the warming centers are going to be open. So overnight tonight, it is going to be cooler than what we've been used to, even if it's really just taking us back towards seasonal. Well, what's that? At this time of year, our average high would be around -2.4, and our average low around -11. So today's high, this actually came back near midnight, because in the afternoon, with even that sunshine, we only climbed up to just under -3. So that's where that high comes from. Our low, yeah, -6.7. Well, tonight we're going to that -11, and then the wind chill taking it colder from there. In terms of the current temperature, we're sitting at -5. We factor in those winds, which have generally been from the northeast, and there we get to this -11 with the wind chill. That's where I'm saying the temperature is going, and our wind chills will be dropping to around -18. And by the way, the wind chill of -20 is what would meet the threshold for an extreme cold weather alert generally, or a -15 temperature. But again, sometimes it's just, hey, everybody, heads up, it's going to be colder tonight than we've been used to. So not a ton of cloud cover. We know we had the sun today, but as those winds shift direction, turn more towards the east and coming off the lake, not only some cloud cover building tonight, perhaps a few flurries, especially along the lakeshore. We could see some of that into tomorrow morning, somewhat isolated in nature, but still that potential. And then kind of a mix of sun and cloud, and at times more cloud, really, that we'll be seeing Thursday. And by Friday, that cloud will really be thickening up, and it'll be harder to see any sunshine. There you go with that temperature overnight tonight. Here we are, again, isolated flurries, nothing to be too concerned about, but -1, I'm hoping we get to -1, Dwight, -2, we'll be in that neighborhood. And then a warm-up's coming. I'll have more on that coming up.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
Elementary teachers at the province have returned to the bargaining table. Today's meeting at a downtown hotel is the first face-to-face negotiation since December 19th. A government-appointed mediator called the two sides back yesterday. Both the province and union wouldn't comment on how the talks are going. This comes after public elementary teachers said they would ramp up their walkouts to 2 days a week if no contract breakthrough is reached by Friday. A battle has been brewing over a downtown rail corridor, all thanks to bold plans to build a massive 8-hectare park on top of it. City Hall reporter Lauren Pelly explains it's a fight about empty space in the sky.
Blue skies and empty space sure doesn't look like a battleground, and yet.
For the last 3.5 years, the city has been working to purchase the air rights for what will be our future rail deck park.
And those talks went off the rails.
We haven't been able to settle on a price, and so today we're taking the important step of, if necessary, expropriating those air rights to finally build our park.
The vision is a massive downtown green space. To start construction in 2022, the city needs full access to the sky above the rail corridor. But right now, there's a lot of other parties involved. City departments own these slivers around the train tracks, while Metrolinx owns a small chunk. And several railway companies own the air rights between Spadina and Blue Jays Way, which are also under a sale agreement to a developer that already owns the rest.
So what exactly are air rights, this thing that different parties are fighting over? Well, as one Toronto law firm puts it, it's the right to use, control, or occupy the space above land. The airspace east of Spadina is what the city is pushing to take over first. The developer that's also aiming to control that area along with the rest of the space is now offering the city other options, including selling it all off to the tune of more than $300 million.
We kind of know what we can pay and what we want to pay, and it's nowhere near what they think we should be paying.
City officials say they're hoping for an outside appraisal to find out the true value of the airspace. The whole rail deck park concept is expected to cost close to $2 billion, money the mayor says would be well spent.
Rail Deck Park, a project that I am focused on building and determined to see built, will ultimately deliver 20 acres of parkland over the Union Station rail corridor.
But that's only if this battle goes the city's way. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
After the break, more on the coronavirus outbreak. A plane full of Americans who were in the Chinese city where it began are now home, but their journey isn't over. Plus, here in Toronto, we head to a facility specifically designed to manage viral pandemics.
As we continue to hear of more cases of the coronavirus, we visit one hospital to see how they're prepared.
You have limited exposure to anybody else until you're absolutely clear what you're dealing with.
I'm Talia Ricci, and coming up, from the ambulance bay to isolation, we see what's in place for potential patients coming in.
The weather update is brought to you by Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
If Toronto should see a spike in cases of the coronavirus, one city hospital is ready to handle the patients. Humber River Hospital was actually designed to manage pandemics. Talia Ricci got a look at what would happen if an ambulance with a suspected coronavirus patient arrived there.
Hospitals across Canada are preparing to take in potential patients showing symptoms of the coronavirus. Here at Humber River Hospital, the process of getting admitted looks a little different in that case, and it starts at the ambulance bay.
So this is the first place if an ambulance brought somebody in they would come to. Holds up to 6 to 8 ambulances, but it can be immediately turned in to a pandemic center. It has the ability to have a male and a female side. Should showers be necessary, it's outfitted for shower and water containment. If we had a mass pandemic problem, we're not anticipating that, and needed to, we could convert this garage into a containment area.
Once the patient arrives here, what's the next step
So
from
the
there?
next step, when the patient arrives and the ambulance drivers have said the patient requires protection, we built a special room right off the ambulance garage, and I'll take you and show you that room. So this is our isolation hazmat entrance. And first of all, you will see that it has no soft products in it. The floor is hard, the walls are hard, they're all scrubbable.
What's the importance of this room here?
The importance of this room is that you stop and you pause, you treat in a very safe environment, you determine what you are dealing with. The nurses would take the history, the physician has the ability to come and see the patient in this particular room, and then from here directly in to our isolation rooms, which are just through this door. So this is our acute unit, and this is where most of our sickest patients come to. This is a trauma room at Humber River Hospital, and you'll see that it is full of equipment, as trauma rooms are. The door closes and it automatically becomes negative pressure. Negative pressure is a system that you build into your HVAC system, and it prevents air from flowing out. So the air that might have a contaminant in it stays within that room where people are properly dressed and properly guarded to protect themselves. So what you have is a gown, gloves, and a mask with face protection. Everything she puts on now is because you would have a contamination situation.
How do you hope people feel when they see this tour and they learn about the facilities that you have here?
We understand how to protect the public. We understand what signs and symptoms to look for. We understand all of the different situations we should be asking the patient about to determine whether or not they are a possible contaminated patient, and that we are comfortable in knowing how to deal with them.
Even as Ottawa prepares a charter flight to bring home Canadians stranded in Wuhan, many other countries are stepping up efforts to evacuate hundreds out of the hard-hit areas. But as Kim Brunhuber explains, authorities welcoming their citizens home are also keeping a wary eye on the uninvited bug.
A plane evacuating more than 200 Americans from Wuhan arrived at a military air base in Riverside County, about 100 kilometers east of Los Angeles. We saw pictures of ground crews dressed in white protective clothing approaching the aircraft. Passengers were loaded onto buses parked near the aircraft. People here, of course, are extremely fearful that officials may be potentially importing disease carriers back to U.S. soil, but the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention were reassuring people that the passengers don't pose any danger. The passengers were screened for symptoms of the virus several times before they boarded the plane, twice during the flight itself, during a stopover in Alaska, and then at the Air Force Base when they arrived. And they'll also be monitored here. And the CDC says passengers won't exactly be free to sort of disperse across the country.
And they could be at the base for up to 2 weeks. So we think that the base is probably the most comfortable accommodation that we could find.
Other countries are also evacuating their citizens. We've seen pictures of a Japanese plane arriving in Tokyo from Wuhan carrying about 200 nationals, and several of those passengers apparently were hospitalized due to coughs and fevers, so they'll be tested for the virus as well, while other countries like Italy have announced they're planning to do the same. Several countries have actually asked the EU for help to repatriate its citizens from Wuhan, including the UK, and British nationals who will be evacuated from Wuhan will be quarantined for 2 weeks. In the meantime, the disease is making its way inexorably around the world. We've seen suspected cases reported in several countries from Finland to Sudan. Humber and Humber, CBC News, Los Angeles.
Pride Toronto is dealing with a number of issues, allegations of money mismanagement, verbal harassment, and the search for a new leader. I'm Angelina King at Pride's annual general meeting. I'll have more on what's on the agenda and why many say tonight will likely be a contentious meeting. That's coming up.
An Ontario provincial police officer is expected to survive after he was struck by a vehicle while on duty. It happened just before 7 last night on a Hamilton highway. The officer was directing traffic through an intersection near a collision scene when he was hit. The officer is a sergeant with the OPP's Burlington detachment. The sentencing hearing wrapped up today for the College Street bar owner and his manager accused of sex assault. Gavin McMillan and Enzo de Jesus Carrasco are convicted of a violent and videotaped gang sex assault of a barely conscious woman. Kaelin Schlatter has more.
Both Gavin McMillan and Enzo de Jesus Carrasco today sat expressionless in court, prosecutors calling for them each to be sentenced to 12 years in prison in the 2016 violent videotaped hours-long gang sex assault of a barely conscious woman. It's hard to picture a more shocking sex assault than what was shown on that video, prosecutor Rick Nathanson told the court. As time went on, it becomes chillingly deliberate. In response, the defense lawyer submitted glowing references for their clients, first-time offenders described as hard workers. McMillan's lawyer read out part of one letter from a reverend, calling McMillan a thoroughly decent human being. McMillan's lawyer suggested he be sentenced to 12 to 18 months for the sexual assault and 6 months for administering a stupefying drug to the then 24-year-old victim. His client maintains his innocence, and today, standing beside him outside the courtroom, remained silent.
What we said in court is that lack of remorse or lack of evidence of remorse is not an aggravating feature. Essentially what we're saying is everyone has a right to a fair trial, and Mr. McMillan has exercised that right. The verdict was reached, and he will be appealing this decision.
In court, de Jesus Carrasco's lawyer said her client should only be sentenced for actions during part of the assault because the jury couldn't reach a verdict on the charge of forcible confinement, calling for him to be sentenced to 6 months less a day. There are many times she could have left and didn't, but the Crown said the men showed one face in public and another in private, pointing to page after page of text messages, showing what the Crown describes as disturbing misogyny.
In Canada, we don't sentence people on their morality or sexual proclivities. We sentence people on crimes.
The justice in this case says because of ongoing trials, he may not be able to deliver all the reasons for his judgment immediately, but he will be handing down a sentence in 2 weeks. Kaelin Schlatter, CBC News, Toronto.
A high-profile murder trial is set to get underway in a Toronto courtroom tomorrow. Tess Ritchie's mother found her body in a Church Street stairwell in 2017. 23-year-old Kaelin Schlatter is charged with first-degree murder. Police say Ritchie died of neck compression. Investigators say the two met on the street after Ritchie and a friend left the bar near Church and Wellesley. Investigators say they believe the two did not know each other before that night. Police were heavily criticized for not doing a proper search of the area after she disappeared. Ritchie's mother found her daughter's body in a Church Street stairwell 4 days later. Schlatter has pleaded not guilty. The trial is expected to last 6 weeks. It's been a tumultuous month for Pride Toronto as the organization deals with the misuse of funds and change in leadership. Angelina King joins us now live from their annual general meeting. And Angelina, a lot of interest in tonight's meeting.
Well, yeah, especially because Pride receives hundreds of thousands of dollars of public funding. Now, tonight's meeting is expected to get pretty contentious, just based on what's been going on over the last few weeks and what's on the agenda. So first, a group of volunteers and members, past and present, say they plan on bringing forward a motion asking for the removal of certain board members over allegations of money mismanagement and verbal harassment. Now, this all comes on the heels of a lot of issues that Pride's been dealing with, including the news that Olivia Nuama is no longer the executive director. That decision was made earlier this month, but it wasn't made public until last week. So that group of volunteers and members also wrote an open letter to the board demanding answers into why she's no longer in that position and why the information wasn't made public until days later. They also are asking the board to address what they call an alarming lack of transparency transparency and leadership. Now, Nuama hasn't addressed her departure publicly. The volunteers and members, some of them believe that she was fired. The board hasn't answered questions into any of this, but I'm expecting we'll learn a little bit more about that tonight. Now, when it comes to those allegations of money mismanagement and verbal harassment, the board has released a statement saying that it hired a third-party investigator, that if any money was misused, it was from before 2019, and that it makes up a very small percentage of its operating budget. It also laid out some ways it's being more transparent. So the board has said that it will be looking for a new leader soon, but some volunteers say that this is already going to have a negative impact on this year's Pride Festival, some of them saying that they already just want to throw in the towel. Dwight?
Thank you, Angelina. Technological innovation has transformed traditional television, radio, and even online services, and that's left large gaps in regulation of those services. But now an independent panel is recommending changes, including a renewed push for Canadian content and new ideas about how to pay for it. Eli Glasner explains.
For years, many in the telecommunications and broadcasting sector said it was time to update the Broadcasting Act, written before the internet became such a big part of our daily lives. The CRTC and federal government agreed and commissioned a panel. Now the report is out and the authors are not holding back, recommending dramatic changes. But panel chair Janet Yale says homegrown content shouldn't be drowned in the new digital age.
As Canadians, we also expect that there will always be a place for Canadian voices and perspectives.
To bring the regulations in line with our connected age, the authors recommend foreign streaming services such as Netflix be compelled to contribute part of their programming budget to Canadian shows. But Yale says the investments shouldn't raise subscription rates.
Look, they spend a lot of money domestically and globally producing content, and it's not necessarily the case that this is going to increase their program budgets. What we're saying is that a portion of those program budgets, which are significant, must qualify as Canadian. So we do not think that this is something that would be passed on to consumers or result in higher prices.
The report also has a lot to say about adjusting Canadian content rules for the age of the algorithm. If the main way you watch is to surf the Netflix homepage, Canadian shows might not appear. But the report suggests forcing streamers to ensure Canadian content is visible and easy to find. In its submission to the panel, Netflix described such practices as anti-consumer and said as a media provider who doesn't draw from Canadian content creation funds, it shouldn't be obligated to contribute. The panel also had much to say about the CBC itself, suggesting the public broadcaster be totally funded by the government and drop all advertising in 5 years. The authors of the report also encouraged the government to bring internet access to all Canadians and suggest the federal government provide broadband access in areas where private companies won't. All in all, the report envisions a new, more expansive role for the CRTC and changes to the bedrock of the Canadian film and TV industry. While the Liberal government has promised to deliver a new bill within a year, asked about whether it's realistic considering the ambitious changes, the Minister of Heritage had this to say.
Let's talk about this at the end of this year, and we'll see how much we will have been able to achieve.
Some audio issues with the end of Eli's piece there. Donald Trump signed the new NAFTA agreement into law today. He did that during a ceremony on the South Lawn of the White House.
Where is the Canadian folks? Where are they? You guys did a good job on us before this deal, I'll tell you. Canada was very tough.
The U.S. president says the deal is a victory for American workers. It allows American dairy and wheat producers access to the Canadian market. Canada is the only one of the 3 countries involved that has not ratified the agreement yet, but that process started today when Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland tabled the deal's implementation bill. Donald Trump's impeachment trial continued today with a question and answer period. Senators asked questions of the individuals who had presented arguments for and against the U.S. president's removal from office. Allison Northcott has the details.
The Senate will convene as a court of impeachment.
This is the next phase of the impeachment trial.
I send a question to the desk.
After Trump's lawyers wrapped up their defense yesterday, questions today from Republican and Democratic senators.
Is there any way for the Senate to render a fully informed verdict in this case without hearing the testimony of Bolton, Mulvaney, and the other key eyewitnesses, or without seeing the relevant documentary evidence?
That is a big one from the Democrats. They want to hear from John Bolton, Trump's former national security advisor, who in an unpublished manuscript reportedly appears to back up the main case the Democrats are making against Trump, that he tried to pressure Ukraine into investigating a political rival.
The short answer to that question is no. There's no way to have a fair trial without witnesses. If you have any question about whether it was a factor, the factor, a quarter of the factor, all of the factor, there is a witness, a subpoena away who can answer that question.
The Democrats want to win over enough moderate Republican senators to win the vote to call witnesses. But most Republican senators don't want new testimony. And today, White House lawyers argued Democrats had their chance to subpoena Bolton during their investigation, but didn't, and that adding witnesses and documents now will only serve to slow things down.
And there'd be depositions, and this would drag on for months. And then that's the new precedent. Then that's the way all impeachments operate in the future. The House doesn't have to do the work. They do it quick, they throw it over the transom, and this institution gets derailed and has to deal with it.
There is another day of questions tomorrow, and the vote on whether to call witnesses is expected on Friday. Allison Northcott, CBC News, Washington.
The allegations against Harvey Weinstein helped usher in the Me Too movement a few years ago. Since then, women have been increasingly coming forward with their own stories of sexual harassment, especially in the workplace. Diane Buckner looks ahead to propose new federal legislation intended to combat it here in Canada.
She was a senior IT systems analyst, experienced and highly paid. Nowadays, Sarah is on a long-term disability leave. We're not identifying her because she says she was sexually harassed on the job.
He just grabbed me and put his arm on my shoulder like this, really close to here. And his face was so close to me. And I got extremely uncomfortable. So I pushed him away. I said, no, what are you doing?
She says it was one of her bosses who got physical.
And that's not the worst part. They actually forced me back to work with him within 2 hours after I complained. Sexual harassment. To be there.
She went to her union, no luck there either. Sarah ended up in hospital with anxiety and depression. Some sexual harassment cases feature famous names or big settlements, like the $100 million the RCMP paid to settle a class action harassment lawsuit. But there are countless lesser-known cases in Canada.
It is ubiquitous. It happens everywhere. In the wake of Me Too, there have been all sorts of surveys from every type of workplace that you can imagine, and it's rampant.
Employment lawyer Janice Rubin was hired by CBC to investigate the Ghomeshi case. She says a new federal law is coming this year.
The employer has to actually proactively look at the workplace and figure out where the risk is.
Bill C-65 spells out new responsibilities for all federally regulated industries, such as communications, transportation, the public service, to prevent workplace violence and harassment.
This has to be solved. This is an indicia of inequality. These are old behaviors from an old type of workplace that still haven't disappeared.
The Weinstein court case has already resulted in other victims in other workplaces coming forward. Now, Canadian employers better get ready to prevent new cases from ever happening. Diane Buckner, CBC News, Toronto.
After the break, Sobeys goes green. The chain becomes the first national grocery store to say no to plastic bags. More on that coming up next. Starting Friday, Sobeys will be removing plastic grocery bags from 225 stores across the country, making them the first national grocery store chain to make the change. They say it will take approximately 225 million plastic grocery bags out of circulation each year. The changes also affect other stores under the Sobeys brand, including Freshco, Safeway, and Foodland. Environmentalists say this is great, but there's still a long way to go.
Plastic bags are a really great example of a single-use plastic that we really don't need. It's really easy to replace. They end up in the environment. They're very lightweight, so they blow around. They end up in our ravines and then eventually in our lakes. They break down into microplastics and harm aquatic wildlife.
Customers are encouraged to bring their own reusable bags. Sobeys stores will also sell large reusable bags for 99 cents and similar ones for 25 cents. Paper bags will also be available for 10 cents. Shoppers have mixed feelings about the announcement.
I like to have my own bags. It's easier to carry, actually, it's more sturdy, and it's better for the environment as well.
It's a little surprising because it's something that might be helpful. Like, sometimes I don't plan to come out and buy stuff, but on my way to work, I realize I need stuff, and plastic bag helps.
Environmentalists say the next step is removing plastic packaging from grocery store shelves. We have to just get used to bringing our own bags, Kaelin.
We do. It's all about forming new habits as we deal with climate change and try and do something about it, right? Let me show you what's going on with our weather headlines. I do want to reiterate that there is an extreme cold weather alert for tonight, and it's more so just because of the change from where we've been with temperatures being above seasonal that we're kind of going back to what is seasonal. So some of that cold air moves in tonight. Scattered flurries, we certainly have that potential, especially near the lakeshore. There shouldn't be much of it. And hey, those temperatures, they go in the other direction towards the mild side again as soon as this weekend. These are the current readings, though. Peterborough at -7 and Barrie at -9. And then in the city, we're at -5 over towards Oshawa, about -6. But you can see it feels like negative double digits when you factor in those winds, which today have been mostly from the northeast. As they turn a little more easterly, that means we've got this somewhat warmer air, at least in terms of the warmer waters, of the lake, and then this cooler air pushing across it. And that'll help to form some more cloud cover. Not like the sunshine we had today. We'll see clouds actually build in the overnight hours so that tomorrow we'll be seeing more cloud mixing with our sun. And again, those flurries possible coming off the lake into tomorrow morning. And then after that, they would really be highly isolated. The next big system coming in, this one back here towards the west, I just want to point it out because that pattern we had of every weekend for 3 weekends where we had a big storm moving in with a lot of moisture. Well, look at this one. It has very little to work with, not much snow or rain there. And so that means for this weekend, we're talking about seeing very little in terms of any accumulations, maybe a couple centimeters of very wet flurries. Overnight tonight, though, caution you, temperatures feeling like close to -20, which is that wind chill threshold for an extreme cold weather alert. And tomorrow afternoon, struggling to get to the freezing mark. We'll be just below it and still with a bit of a wind chill. As we head towards the weekend, though, this is what I mean, all that reversal again. We'll be seeing those temperatures coming back up and that weak system Saturday night into Sunday, Dwight.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
Up next, I talk with Hall of Fame quarterback Dan Marino ahead of the Super Bowl this Sunday.
Looking at the game, I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think a lot of people think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think it'll be a little more low-scoring.
With those quarterbacks slinging?
Yeah, I know. I don't know. It's just a feeling I got.
Okay. Who is the Dolphin great putting his money on? Find out after the break. The Super Bowl is, of course, this Sunday. The Kansas City Chiefs will take on the San Francisco 49ers. The game will be played in Miami at the Hard Rock Stadium. That's also where you can find a life-size bronze statue of former NFL quarterback Dan Marino. He played for the Dolphins for 17 seasons, taking them to 1 Super Bowl. I chatted with him about his predictions for Sunday's big game. 100th NFL season, 54th Super Bowl, Chiefs 49ers. Let's start with your thoughts on the big game.
So I'm excited about it because it's in Miami also.
Yep.
And
somebody else played in Miami and 49ers in Miami ways back.
Miami played the 49ers, but that was out in Palo Alto.
Oh,
yeah. But, you know, I looking at the game, I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think a lot of people think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think it'll be a little more low-scoring.
With those quarterbacks slinging?
Yeah, I know. I don't know. It's just a feeling I got. Okay. I mean, it's not but because Mahomes, the way he plays the game and he could score so quick, I think it's going to be a close game. Go down to the end, and Kansas City wins because Mahomes can bring him from behind.
You're picking KC.
I'm picking KC.
No hard feelings about that Super Bowl and when you played. That's not.
Oh no, that's okay. That's all right. That's
not
a long time ago. I'm over it.
Actually, that's my next question. You're one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history, Hall of Famer. Too many accolades for me to even list here. When this weekend approaches, do you think about, I never got that Super Bowl. I got everything else but that.
There's no doubt. I would be lying to you if I didn't think about it. So it's the one thing in my career that I didn't achieve. Like I've been, in the Hall of Fame, everything else, and know what it's like to feel like when you walk off the field the last Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday, and be, a Super Bowl champion. So that's the one thing, and I do, to be honest with you, I do think about it, especially when the game's on at times.
What kind of difference?
But it's been a long time.
It has been a long time. But everybody, it's like Charles Barkley. Everybody bugs him. Still one of the greatest ever to play the game. What kind of difference do you see in the game now compared to when you played it?
Well, I think the rules are different, obviously. I think guys are a little bigger, faster, stronger. But at the same time, it hasn't changed as much as people might think it's changed.
Did you guys get as much protection?
No, that's what I'm saying. The rules has changed. So, the quarterbacks, now you can't hit them below the knees, you can't hit them in the head, and that's why guys are playing longer. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
And the way I think it's a little easier to throw the ball because of the rules in the secondary and what they call, as far as pass interference is concerned.
How we watch the game has also changed.
Yes,
and that's kind of why you're in town.
Yes, I'm in town.
Yeah, let's talk about the Zone.
So download the Zone, the app, and watch the game, the Super Bowl on the Zone in Canada here, anywhere. And the unique thing about it is they're changing how people watch sports because you can watch a sport, you download it, you get it on your iPhone, you get it on your phone, on your computer, on your
tablet,
TV, pretty much anywhere. So that's why I'm here, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Once again, I just want to ask you again, 49ers Chiefs, you are going with those Chiefs?
Kansas City, yeah.
Can you give me a number maybe, what do you think?
So I was thinking maybe like, 30-27 or something like that. That's kind of low. Well, I don't know if that's low scoring, but it's low scoring than more people think it's going to be.
It's going to be a good game.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Thanks for your time. Pleasure meeting you, man.
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Not often you get to meet a Hall of Famer in person like this.
It's Fleming to Leon. Sinclair wide open. Is this it? It is! Sinclair has done it!
That right there is a record-breaking goal. Canada's own Christine Sinclair has set a world record for most intentional goals with 185. The tally against St. Kitts and Nevis less than an hour ago pushed her past the previous record holder, Abby Wambach of the U.S. Sinclair had tied the record early in the game on a penalty shot. The 36-year-old from Burnaby, BC, is playing in her 290th career game for Canada. The best on the pitch we've ever produced in this country.
Most international goals. That's incredible.
Yeah, great player.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see her in the Olympics. So a little bit cold, but short period of time.
Yes, that's right. And so that extreme cold weather alert in place for tonight, coming close at least to that criteria, so making sure those warming centers will be opened up because of it. And also it's just kind of because we're not used to this, we've been running so much above seasonal. But tonight we go to -11. Kind of where we should be for an overnight low this time of year. It'll feel like close to -20, and then a few isolated flurries possible tonight into tomorrow morning. Kind of a mix of sun and cloud otherwise, Dwight, and a high of about -1 tomorrow afternoon. I hope we get to -1.
And you promised to warm up on the way. All right, that's it for our show tonight. Thank you for joining us. Mike Wise has your next local news tonight after the National at 11. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 6. Have a great night, everybody.